Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today. Welcome, Trinity.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, it's great to, thank you so much for having me.
Well, today I'm hosting Trinity Cunningham. She is a fantasy / sci-fi-ish writer, correct?
Yeah.
And there's a little story behind that. But I think we'll talk about your book first, and then we can talk about that story.
Yeah, sounds good.
So tell me about your book. I think we have a little preview behind you.
Yeah. It's called Bloodbound, and it's part of the Guardians of the Well of Firestone series. That's going to be ultimately a trilogy, following the Guardians of the Well of Firestone. The first book follows twin brothers, and a curse. It wipes all the magic from the land, and so these brothers, they find out that their blood is entwined with the magic. So they unmistakably break the curse, and they sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here. They mistakenly break the curse and reawaken the magic, but not fully. So then, as beauty unfolds, they find themselves caught up in this long-standing war that never truly resolved. And the tyrant ruler of the land wishes to wipe magic once and for all. So it's
okay. So, what is their quest, to restore all the magic, or to? Yeah, I mean, what side are they on, or do we even know what side they're on?
Well, there's a bit of so they mistakenly reawaken it, so they don't mean to, and it's unintentional. The twin brothers are very very different. So one of them is very gung ho, yeah, let's go do this, and the other one's like, no. So it's kind of that reluctant hero a little bit, where it follows Raiden, who's a little more trepidate. Yeah, he's just not as eager to go jump into magic. He's experienced or encountered this before, and it left him scarred with nightmares and trauma. So he's not as willing. So when this goes on, he kind of finds he's stuck with this magic now, and he's got to learn how to cope and manage throughout. And as this is going on, as he's trying to deal with this, the tyrant ruler's going nuts with the magic being reawakened, and then there's a few other factors in there that kind of come into play.
Fun. Set up the world for me. Is this contemporary? Are we?
It's a little more like a historic piece. So like it would take place pre-motorized vehicles and technology. So it's a little more of a medieval kind of setting or theme, like what you would see. Yeah, it's the world is like, so it's one country, one small country, it's not even a big country, in amongst these 8 of them, and the whole story will take place like in this one country. The like other stories will take place kind of in other ones, but this one focuses solely on Kartha, it's called. And Kartha is quite unique because it's got this healing magic, this healing rock that kind of makes up a lot of the land itself. And that's sort of where the magic system takes place. So
okay, and are there just humans, or are there other types of beings in the story?
It's mostly humans, but there is, so like I didn't want to write elves necessarily, so I didn't they're not elves, but they're very close, like a close relative to an elf. They're called elder race, and they're a magical race, so they do have magic. They don't look any different than humans, and the only reason why they have magic and are different from humans is because they happen to be within the vicinity of this area in the country when a certain major event happened. So it's the only thing that kind of separates them or distinguishes them, and it extends and prolongs their lifespan and makes them very elf-like.
Neat. And can all humans use the magic if they want to?
No. So it's one of those things that only the elder race can have magic, and so that was kind of part of why it was a big deal when these twin brothers, who are not part of this race, get magic.
Okay.
So
And
it's
is the Tyrant King one of the elder race? Or
the ruler. No, he's human, and there's so like this is the first book, and then the second book will be a sequel, but then the third book is a prequel, so it kind of goes back to how his family almost like came into this place of power and where it all started and why they're so anti-magic and the race.
right. Well, it would seem to be that if you don't have magic, you might be fearful of those that do because they could at some point maybe get an upper hand, right?
Yeah, and like that's part of it too, is he likes to exert his power, and this is I've got power, but um he's very controlling in that way.
And how did you come up with the idea for this world and these characters?
Originally it was a dream, I think, when I was younger, and so I actually wrote it as a screenplay at like years and years ago when I was getting into screenwriting, and this was the first kind of like, oh, this is cool, okay, let's go with it. And then when I came back to it in 2020, and I was like I just was like, okay, I'm gonna write a book, and I'm gonna take this story and I'm gonna revamp it, I'm gonna make it something new. So I started to work on it, and then as I was working on it, it was like, oh, this isn't the same story at all. So it's like it ended up, I was writing it as a prologue for like, so I started to write a prologue, and I know there's like all these things about prologues, but at the time I was like, I'm writing a prologue and I'm going to see where this goes. And it was just these twin brothers. It was going to lead into the story of this other character. And what ended up happening was this other character didn't get mentioned at all, and it ended up just being the twins story. And so the second book is the other character who was originally the idea and the thought that started it all. um, so I kind of just, I think there needed to be a story told about these brothers.
Well, sometimes that happens. Yeah, I had like a character in one of my books that was supposed to be on the bad guy side, and then I just liked his character so much that I couldn't let him betray them. So I just like, and then he got his own book all by himself, and I'm like, how did that happen?
I love that.
So
When that
yeah,
happens.
and talk to me about your genre, because I asked you a couple of questions beforehand, and you said you were a fantasy writer, but or you were a sci-fi writer first and then it became fantasy. How did that
Like
happen?
my love is sci-fi. Like my first love is sci-fi. I gravitate towards it always. Movies, TV shows, books, all of it. Like if it's sci-fi, I'm like, that's my thing. So I thought that I'd write sci-fi. And so when I wrote this story originally as a screenplay, when I said I did, it was originally written as a sci-fi. It wasn't going to be magic. It was going to be like a cool kind of like piece of technology. It was a little like sci-fi, and it was going to be like just take place in our world a little bit more. So, it didn't end up happening, and the whole world out and became a thing. I was like, okay, so this story was never meant to be sci-fi. But I do have plans for sci-fis coming up.
In the same series or a different series?
No, different series. It won't even be a series. Like the very first story that I ever came up with will be a sci-fi, and it'll involve a little bit more like alien life form kind of stuff. So definitely sci-fi.
Fine. Well, tell us a little bit about your publishing journey. This is your first debut novel, is that correct? I guess that was
Yeah.
that was redundant, but sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, no, it's my first. It's been a process. It's been a journey for sure, is a good word for it. It was so like when I first started writing, I knew that I wanted to publish. I just didn't know anything about the publishing world. And I was working with, and I took a storytelling course at the time, and it gave me a chance to work with an editor that I love her books. Like she's like one of my favorite books was by her and this other guy. So I was like, oh, this is so cool. So I got to kind of work with her, and she gave me some great advice on writing and kind of starting out and tips for publishing and where to go, how to do things. It gave me a bit of a head start to start asking questions and learning about, self-publishing versus traditional publishing versus hybrid versus all these, however you do it. And I didn't really know what route I wanted to go. But when I started to really kind of come down to, okay, I'm getting close to this, and I've put so much work into this now. I've hired an editor and I've gone through this process, and I'm doing all this work. Why not just see it through to the end kind of thing? So I ended up deciding to self-publish just because also my schedule with, I was homeschooling my kids at the time, and full time at home. I couldn't really dedicate time to deadlines and things. So I was like, hey, we're doing this. So I went all in, and it's been a learning curve for sure. It's been lots of working with I hired publishers to help me kind of like distribute it and get it out, and work with me on marketing and tutor me, we'll say, for like social media and getting just basically learning how to market. So
Right.
it's
Yeah, I think
another job in itself.
yeah, that's a big learning curve for most authors too.
Yeah. So it's been good though. It's been a good journey. Now
Fun.
just learning to navigate in this time that I've published now. It's like, okay, there's a new phase, new stage in my life here.
Neat. Yeah, when I started writing, how I started writing is after my kids went to bed, instead of watching Netflix or whatever, I would just write every evening, and that's how but then it was like 10 years later, and I finally had a book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I started too. It's like kids go to bed, everyone goes to bed, and then I get to writing. And I don't know why I haven't been doing it for years prior.
I know. Yeah. So talk about your editor and some of the other authors that inspired you.
Yeah, so first author that inspired me is my own mom. She wrote a children's book, and she's always written poetry and songwriting. Her and my dad do songwriting, so she's kind of always been my inspiration as far as writing and motivating. And she's just always been like, yeah, go do it, go, you got this, you're good. So it's like, okay, I can do this. um, so her and my dad both. And then my editor has been super encouraging, and she's been fantastic, like working with her. And just really, over the course of the year that we worked together, it was building that relationship, and her just really immersing herself in this world with me, and helping it to come alive in the way that it did, that I hope it does. And yeah, then there's just, other books that I read, and authors that I enjoy reading their work. It's always, a learning. I'm always learning and soaking it in.
Yeah, so when if I'm I write in several different genres, but if I'm writing in fantasy, I don't read fantasy then, because I'm always scared that I'm going to be influenced by something else.
Right.
I want to make sure I don't steal anybody's work or anything. But
Yeah.
so, but it sounds like you primarily read sci-fi. Is that correct?
No, actually, I don't. I do love sci-fi. It's what I gravitate towards. When I'm like browsing in a store, if I see something, if it looks a little sci-fi, I'm like, oh, I like that. But it's I'm in a book club now too, so I'm reading a lot more books that I typically wouldn't pick up even like and look at. I would just like walk by. But it's been a good experience to read some of them, because I just finished one that's not sci-fi. It's more like historical fiction, real events that took place with fictional characters, and I'm like, I love this kind of stuff too. So
Yeah, I think a lot of creatives have that, like, what if in any situation, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Fun. So talk about your characters maybe, and the inspiration for your characters. Do you take them from real life people, or are they just kind
Um,
of appear in your mind?
they more just appear in my mind. I think they kind of develop. So for like, I'll use the example of Raiden being one of the twin brothers in the book. Um, he came, like, he was a first thought, but I always knew that it would be twins. So I always knew that there would, like, Raiden would be my main character, but then there'd be these twin brothers. Um, and in my mind, he just kind of started to take shape, and without me really knowing or realizing it at the time, he's taken on a lot of my own qualities and traits. And that's probably just like, I find that for me anyway, personally, writing is like expressing yourself, right? That's what it is. And it just, at the time that I wrote his character, I needed to express his character, and bits of me came out in that. So it's just like, it was more me in that character, and his growth, and his like moving through these life circumstances, and learning how to cope and adjust and adapt. And especially 2020, right? Like, aren't we all doing that?
I know.
um,
I was relating it to you when you were writing too. I mean, definitely
yeah,
need an escape, and you need like a safe place that you're processing all these feelings and anxieties, and
Yeah,
okay, in my story world, I can control a little bit of the outcome,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I totally felt like I had that control. Like, it was a good thing for me for sure.
Yes,
Other
it's so interesting.
characters, sorry,
Sorry,
what's
go
that?
ahead. No, go ahead.
Other characters just like they take shape. They have a personality in my mind to begin with, and then as I write, their characters come through like they were always there, and I'm just learning who they are as I go.
Right. Yeah, I think as a, it's sometimes I put like little like sheets up around my workspace. So I like remember, okay, this person would do this and their main character traits. And every scene you come to, you have to be like, okay, this person would react this way, or wait, how would this person react based on
Exactly.
their prior history or their personality, or are you going to make them go rogue and do something totally different?
Yeah, yeah. You kind of pursue a certain path and you're like, do they do that? Would they act that way? I had that with the recent one that I'm working on right now. It's a first draft, but like this character kind of started, she's got this personality and she's like this, but then slowly she started to veer away from that. And I'm like, oh no, this isn't right. And the writing wasn't as smooth then. And I was like, something's wrong, something's up. It's like as soon as they're not acting true to themselves, it's like, okay, let's go back and
Yeah, it's funny how you can pick up that yourself, like in your own writing.
yeah, yeah. So,
Neat. Talk to me about like how much you plan this. So obviously you have a second and third book planned. How much do you plan this out? Like, do you have like a meticulous um, draft or a meticulous outline, or are you more like, okay, let's see what's going to happen next?
I'm pretty much like, let's see what's happening. When I wrote Bloodbound, it was like that. Like I literally sat down with a blank page and was like, hey, where's this taking me? So I started going and it went where it went. And I mean, it wasn't the most like practical way of doing things. It definitely went through like multiple rounds of revisions and changes, like drastic. Um, it's a first book, right? Like it's a learning thing. So then the next book, I was like, okay, I kind of have an idea of what I did and how that works. So let's go back and like let's kind of plot some points out. So I started to jot points down, and then it ended up taking me to a certain point in the story where I can kind of take it from there and move forward. That seems to be the method that works for me right now. Is just like plot to a point, right to that point, and then the new plots will come, new points. So it's a process of a bit here, then write it, then a bit there, write it, and then eventually I have a story.
Do you always know what the end of your book is going to be before,
No,
like from the beginning? No.
no, not at all. I'm currently at the climax in the one I'm working on, and I'm like, I think I kind of have an idea now, but even so, it's like I won't know until I start writing, and it's like, oh, this is happening. Okay, like
Yeah, like you said, characters change, points change, and that's
yeah, yeah,
the fun creative part. So is your background in writing? Do you have, I mean, you said you did playwriting or screenwriting for a while.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's just I guess it's always just been a passion. I know every writer probably says that right from early childhood. I've always loved writing. It's like it's true. I've always gravitated towards writing some form or another. And so I did poetry, I did songwriting, I did like screenwriting just because I love movies so much. Like I love movies. And I like obsessed over it as a teenager and a kid. So like I have a whole collection of DVDs still that I'm like, I can't part with these. But it was always my dream. But then I kind of got into um some stuff in the industry, like the film, and like I started to kind of take on jobs in the industry. And I was like, this is not my atmosphere. I don't like this atmosphere. It's really busy. So I kind of learned pretty quick that that wasn't necessarily my path. But then when I decided to write a book, I was like, I still get to write stories. It's just, I don't have to be immersed in the world of the industry. Um, but yeah, no, it's definitely no, I didn't do anything like as far as job wise in writing. It was just more
No,
courses that I took and pursuing a path of something that I loved.
neat. Yeah, well, it's funny because you say all authors say they love writing forever. I didn't.
Okay, that's yeah, yeah, I wasn't
Like
sure.
I did. No, like I didn't like writing until like graduate school. It was like
That's
way
funny.
down the road. But I started out in science, so like coming from
Okay,
a totally
quite
different
change,
place.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, everybody has their path, so it's
Yeah,
really
yeah. No, I never thought I'd write a book. I'll say that much. Like I even said it at one point. I literally said word for word. I'm like, oh, I could never write a book. It's too much detail. And it's like, I love writing details. And I've had reviews come back saying like so much detail. And I'm like, oh, okay, I write in detail. Apparently I like that.
I did that. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Pat myself on the back.
Yeah. So
And do you constantly have new ideas that you're jotting down to say, oh, I want to write this, I want to write this?
yeah, yeah. I had one fairly recently and I was like, oh, well, that's a really cool story. And I'm like, it's almost veering towards like superheroes. And I'm like, that's not at all what I thought I'd write, but I'm like, it's almost like espionage superheroes kind of thing. And I'm like, that's cool. I like that. I'll pursue that at some point. So
Well, if you have that, yeah, attention for detail and writing like adventure or like battle scenes or
yeah,
those types of
action.
scenes, it's action scenes. Yes, thank you. You can kind of put those in any story, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I love action adventure. So as long as there's lots of that, I'm good.
Fun. Well, I too have saved my DVDs and I had to hide them from my husband so he would not throw them away. So
Funny.
I'm
Yeah.
with you on that.
Don't get rid of them.
I know somebody asked me how I was telling them about a movie, and I was like, well, if you can't find it, I have it on DVD.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I know when people come to me, they're like, do you have this movie? It's like, yeah, I do.
If you have a device to play it, then I have it.
Yeah. Well, my husband plays Xbox, so we've got the Xbox that works.
Got that down. Well, I'm so excited about your new release and your upcoming releases. What will the second book be called?
You know what? I've been struggling for a name for that one. I want to kind of stick to the bound theme. So I've got Bloodbound. I was like, I don't know, I could do like Destiny Bound or Bound by Destiny or like there's another word I was thinking of, but I can't think of it now. But I was kind of going along those lines. I was like, oh, Homebound. My mom's like, no, that's too much like Homeward Bound. I think of a dog and cat. I'm like, yeah, no, probably not.
Or Home Alone or something, right?
Yeah. It's like, no, it's got too many. It wouldn't feel right in the same kind of like feel as Bloodbound.
Right.
Something along the lines of like the character is following his fate, his destiny. I don't know. I'm like, I say that I don't know how I feel about fate and destiny stories yet. I'm like, oh, it's bound to happen.
Things we all ponder while we're trying to go to sleep at night, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And are all these male characters? It sounds like maybe.
So Bloodbound is multiple point of view, and the main character is Rain, but it also follows the point of view of Layla, a girl, like one of the Eld race, and then another character, Island, and then one more character who doesn't have like a full point of view, but his role is he's there, he's needed in there. So it's technically four people, multiple, but there's one female, and then the second book will be two point of view, and it's a male and a female. Like it's not like romance. Like I don't follow like the romance plot where they're like eventually they'll end up together. It's not like that. They're just two separate lives being led, but they do collide at the end. I always like to bring them together, even if it's not like in a romantic sense, just kind of closure with everyone kind of coming together.
Yeah.
Mostly I write male protagonists. I don't know. I like to read more male protagonists than female, so I write it. But I do have like the odd stories with female, and then obviously with this one, like there is still my female lead in these ones.
And you said multiple point of views. So is it first person, like switching back and forth, or is it third person?
It's third person, yeah. Okay. Third person, like past. So like he said, she said kind of thing.
Right. Neat. Well, thank you so much for being here. Tell us where we can find your book.
Yeah, so it's basically anywhere you can buy online. But if you check out my website, www.trinitycunningham.ca, it gives a list of all the places you can purchase physical copies or ebooks, depending on your preference. And so you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like places like that. But
fun. Like well, we'll definitely have TrinityCunningham.ca. That's good to know. Yeah. And we'll definitely have links in the notes for the show.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you again, and best wishes for your upcoming release, and congrats on Bloodbound.
Thank you so much. This was great. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.